The checkered floor of Leo's diner stretches out in black and white squares beneath flickering neon that hums like a dying animal. The clock on the wall reads 3:22 a.m. Outside, the nor'easter screams against the windows, wind that cuts like a blade wrapped in ice, and the highway beyond is empty except for abandoned cars and the memory of better weather. Nicholas Calabrese kneels on this cold linoleum in a suit that costs more than most people earn in 6 months. For $1,000 of tailored charcoal wool now streaked with blood that is not his own. His shirt, crisp white cotton, torn open at the collar. His dark eyes, the kind of eyes that have ordered men into unmarked graves, are fixed on the woman across from him in the cracked red vinyl booth. Her name is Aria Morgan. She is 28 years old but looks closer to 40. Her left eye is swollen completely shut, purple bleeding into black like a bruise that will never heal. Finger marks circle her throat, dark purple on pale skin, spelling out a violence that happened hours ago when she said no to a man named Douglas Hale who believed her no meant nothing at all. She clutches a photograph. Her hands shake so badly the image trembles. A man in military uniform smiles from within the frame. Her husband. Dead for 2 years. All she has left of him is this photograph and a daughter named Emma who is 5 years old and has not eaten in 3 days. $34, Aria whispers through broken sobs. Her voice sounds like something that has been shattered and is trying to hold itself together. That is all I have. $34 and a car that will not start and a daughter who asks me if she will die soon because she is always so hungry. Nicholas does not move. He kneels perfectly still on the diner floor, and in the silence that follows her words, the sound of the coffee maker behind the counter seems impossibly loud. The burner hisses. The fluorescent lights above buzz like insects trapped in glass. His lieutenants stand behind him. Sergio and Gino. Men who have worked for Nicholas Calabrese for 15 years. Men who have watched him order executions with a single glance, who have seen him negotiate with the heads of 5 different families, who have witnessed his cold calculations in 100 boardrooms and back alleys. They have never seen him kneel before anyone. The waitress behind the counter, a woman named Carol who has worked at Leo's for 19 years, holds a coffee pot mid-pour. Her mouth is open. The pot trembles in her hand. Nicholas reaches out one shaking hand and takes Aria's fingers. His hand is large. Her hand is small. The difference is a geography of power that is about to vanish. Where is your daughter right now? His voice is barely above a whisper. It sounds like something breaking inside a vault. With my neighbor. Mrs. Chen. She said she would watch her until morning. She said. Aria's voice fractures. She said Emma could sleep in her apartment tonight because it is warmer and my car. The words dissolve. She is crying now in a way that suggests she has been holding this collapse inside her body for months. Nicholas does not let go of her hand. My husband died, Aria says. The words spill out like water through a broken dam. He was Army. IED in Afghanistan. We were going to build something. We had plans. We had a house. We had? She stops. Breathes. The breath shudders. Then the medical bills came. $230,000. They said if we had insurance it would be different, but we did not. And the house was sold. And my savings was gone by month 4. And I got the job at Whitmore Hotel, and I have been working doubles for 8 months, and I make minimum wage plus tips, except Douglas Hale, the manager, he takes the tips. He says the money goes to the house account. He says I should be grateful to have a job at all. Her eye that is not swollen closes. One tear spills down her cheek. And tonight he asked me to come into his office to discuss something about next week's schedule. And when the door was closed, he put his hands on me and said that if I wanted to keep my job, I needed to be more grateful. I needed to show him how grateful. And I said no. And he did not like my no. The bruises on her throat seem to darken as Nicholas watches them. After I got away from him, I drove in my car to try to calm down. The car started making a sound, a grinding sound from the engine. And then it just stopped. On the side of Route 1A in the rain. And I sat there for 20 minutes trying to call for help, but my phone was at 2% battery, and I did not know what to do, so I got out and started walking to find somewhere warm, and that is when your men found me collapsed in the road. Nicholas closes his eyes. He does not open them again for several seconds. When he does, something in his face has changed. The expression is the same, but there is something moving underneath it, something ancient and dark and wounded. "What is your daughter's name?" he asks. "Emma. She is 5 years old. She likes to draw with colors. She likes purple and blue. She said yesterday that she draws colors for sad days because when she feels sad, she can look at the colors and remember that happy days exist too. Even though she has been sad almost her entire life, she still somehow remembers that happy days exist." The coffee maker hisses again behind the counter. Nicholas stands. He does not release her hand. He pulls it gently upward so that Aria stands with him, her small hand swallowed inside his large one. "You are not going back to your car," he says. His voice is different now. It sounds like a man making a promise he intends to keep even if it costs him everything. "You are not going back to Whitmore Hotel. You are not going back to Douglas Hale. Do you understand me?" Aria stares at him. She does not understand him. "Who are you?" she whispers. "My name is Nicholas Calabrese," he says. "And I am going to help you." Behind him, Sergio and Gino exchange a look. It is a look that has no name for what it means. It is the look of men watching their entire world shift on its axis. In 15 years they have never heard Nicholas promise help to a stranger. In 15 years they have never seen him kneel. The waitress Carol sets down her coffee pot. She reaches beneath the counter and presses a button. A recording begins. She does not know what is happening, but she knows something is. She knows it the way a seismograph knows an earthquake before the ground starts shaking. Nicholas turns to Sergio and Gino. He speaks 4 words. "Find Douglas Hale." The wind outside screams against the windows. The neon light flickers. The clock on the wall ticks toward 3:23 a.m., toward a morning that will come whether anyone is ready for it or not. And in that diner, at that exact moment, something begins to move in the darkness that will not stop moving until 2 people who deserve to fall have fallen all the way down. But to understand how this happened, you must go back further. Back to 3 years ago when Nicholas Calabrese was not a man who knelt before anyone. Back to a night when he made a choice that cost him more than money ever could. Back to the day his brother was alive and then the day his brother was not. 3 years earlier. A penthouse office overlooking the Boston Harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the lights of the city like scattered diamonds. Nicholas sits behind a mahogany desk the size of a small car. He is 35 years old. His dark hair is cut short and precise. A scar runs from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a white line that catches the lamplight. He wears a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. A gold watch on his wrist costs more than most houses in Boston. A silver ring on his right hand carries the seal of his family. His brother Marco sits across from him. Marco is 2 years younger. He looks like Nicholas but softer. Weaker. His hands shake slightly as he places an envelope on the desk. "They offered me $2 million, Marco says. His voice sounds guilty. It sounds like the voice of a man who has already betrayed and is about to betray again. To tell them your operations. Your suppliers. Your routes. Your people. $2 million, Nicholas. I have debts. I have people looking for me. People who want me dead." Nicholas does not touch the envelope. "You said no," Nicholas says. "It is not a question." "I said I would think about it," Marco says. His eyes will not meet his brother's eyes. And that is the moment when Nicholas Calabrese, who will one day kneel on a diner floor for a stranger, picks up a pistol from the drawer and shoots his own brother in the heart. Not because he is a monster. Because he is a man who understands that betrayal compounds. That a man who will betray once will betray again. That the poison has already entered the system and cannot be cured. Marco falls beside the mahogany desk. He is dead before he hits the floor. Nicholas stands. He does not look at his brother's body. He presses a button on the phone on his desk. He says one word. Clean. 2 men enter. They do not ask questions. They do not speak. They simply lift Marco's body and carry him out, and within an hour there will be nothing left but the memory and the knowledge that Nicholas Calabrese, the man who loved his brother more than he loved his own life, had put a bullet through his brother's heart to protect an empire built on murder and money. And for 3 years after that night, Nicholas Calabrese did not feel anything at all. He did not trust anyone. He did not lower his guard. He did not kneel. But 8 months ago, a woman named Aria Morgan started working the night shift at the Whitmore Hotel, and she did not know yet that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. 8 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in October, Aria Morgan stood in the center of a room that no longer belonged to her. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, peeling linoleum in the kitchen, but it had been hers. Now it was ending. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, folded in thirds, the creases worn soft from her hands opening and closing it 100 times as if the words might change. 7 days. That was all the law gave her. 7 days to gather her daughter, her possessions, her entire life, and disappear. She was 32 years old, though her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed someone far older. Her brown eyes had permanent shadows beneath them, the kind that sleep does not erase. Her dark hair, once thick and shiny, had dulled into something limp and tired. She wore a faded blue t-shirt with a hole near the collar, and her hands were maps of her labor. Calluses. Cracks. A wedding ring she could not bring herself to remove, even though her husband had been dead 14 months. James Morgan had been a Marine. Good man. Loyal. He died in a training accident, the helicopter malfunctioned on a routine exercise, and the paperwork got lost. The life insurance that was supposed to protect them evaporated into bureaucratic failure. $32,000 worth of protection, erased by a single form that was never filed correctly. The military said they were sorry. They sent a flag. They did not send money. The rent on this apartment was $1,200 a month. James had worked construction before the Marines. They had managed. Barely. But managing meant no savings, no cushion, no backup plan for the moment when he would not come home. Aria walked to the refrigerator and opened it. Inside, 1 carton of milk with 3 days left, half a loaf of bread turning hard at the edges, butter, and a jar of peanut butter. She had $3,400 in a savings account. Rent arrears totaled $8,900 when you counted the late fees and penalties. The math was simple. She was $5,500 short, and that was before she had to find somewhere else to live. She closed the refrigerator and turned to look at the living room, where cardboard boxes stood in neat stacks. Everything she could fit into boxes. Everything that mattered, and also everything that did not matter at all, because none of it could change what was about to happen. The front door burst open. Emma rushed in, 6 years old, her dark hair in 2 braids that Rebecca had done that morning, her backpack bouncing against her small shoulders. Behind her came her Aunt Rebecca, tired-eyed, apologetic in the way of people doing their best with too little. "Mommy!" Emma dropped her backpack and ran to Aria, who caught her and held her close, breathing in the smell of her daughter's hair, the scent of the strawberry shampoo that cost $3.50 and felt like an impossible luxury. "Hi, baby," Aria whispered into her daughter's braids. "How was school?" "Miss Chen said I did good on my math. She put a star on my paper." Emma pulled back and showed her mother an imaginary star, beaming with the simple pride of a child who had no idea that her mother's hands were shaking. Rebecca lingered in the doorway, her 2 kids waiting in the hallway behind her. She was only 4 years older than Aria, but she looked a decade older, worn down by her own survival. "Aria, I need to talk to you about something. The tone. That specific tone. Aria knew it immediately. They moved into the kitchen, out of Emma's earshot, though Emma was already distracted, playing with her stuffed rabbit on the living room floor, talking to it in soft whispers about school and stars. Child services came to my place, Rebecca said quietly. This morning. Someone reported that Emma doesn't have a stable home. They wanted to know about her living situation, why she's living with me most nights. They asked about you. They asked where you're working, whether you have housing. The world did not stop moving. It should have. But Aria kept breathing. She kept standing. Her hands gripped the kitchen counter because if she did not grip something, she might fall through the floor. What did you tell them? Aria's voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I told them the truth. That you're working, that you're her mother, that you're doing everything you can. But Aria, they're opening a file. They said if Emma doesn't have a stable address within 30 days, they'll have to take her into protective custody pending a family court hearing. 30 days. She had 7 for the eviction and 30 for the state to take her daughter. Emma laughed from the living room. A pure, uncomplicated laugh. The kind of laugh that breaks your heart into pieces too small to reassemble. What am I supposed to do? Aria whispered. Rebecca reached out and squeezed her sister's arm. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. 3 hours later, Aria sat in her sedan in the parking lot of the Whitmore Hotel downtown. The car was a 2007 Honda Accord that had never quite died, even though she sometimes begged it to. It was parked in the employee lot, surrounded by spaces for the luxury vehicles that belonged to managers and corporate staff. Her car looked like a beggar crouching among princes. She had a few minutes before her shift. She sat with her hands on the steering wheel and did the math again in her head, as if different numbers might appear if she concentrated hard enough. $34 in her wallet. That was everything liquid. Everything physical. Everything she could touch or spend or use to keep her daughter alive. The Whitmore Hotel was a 4-star property with a marble lobby and a crystal chandelier and rooms that cost $400 a night. She had worked here for 5 months, hired by the housekeeping department. The pay was $15 an hour, and she worked 10 to 14 hours most days, doing the rooms that the hotel's wealthier guests used as expensive closets and beds and places to take showers. She grabbed her work bag from the back seat and headed toward the employee entrance. As she walked past the front desk through a service corridor, she could hear the sounds of the lobby, the soft classical music, the murmur of checking conversations, the clink of ice in expensive drinks. The basement locker room was dim and utilitarian. She changed into her uniform, black pants, white shirt, a small name tag that read Maria, and clipped her hair back. In the bathroom mirror above the sink, her reflection stared back at her, and for just a second she did not recognize herself. This woman looked trapped. Desperate. Already defeated. But then footsteps sounded on the concrete floor behind her, and she turned to face the day. Douglas Hale stood in the doorway of the locker room, his arms crossed. He was 45 years old, thinning hair slicked back with pomade, an expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than Aria made in 2 months. He was the hotel's operations manager, which meant he controlled schedules, tips, staff assignments, and the invisible machinery that kept everything running. Morgan, he said, his voice smooth like oil on water. You're scheduled for 14 rooms today. And then you're staying after for inventory. I can't stay after, Aria said. I need to pick up my daughter. Your sister doesn't watch her past 7. Not reliably. Hale smiled, and his smile was the smile of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He was handsome in a ruined way, the kind of handsome that comes from money and entitlement and the assumption that the world exists for his benefit. Too bad, he said. We need inventory done. You want more hours? You stay for inventory. I understand. But I can't tonight. Then I guess you don't need the hours. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. You know, Aria, you could make this easier on yourself. I could guarantee you 6 hours of overtime every week. Guaranteed, no questions. All you have to do is be a little nicer to me. Understand? He said it casually, as if he were offering her a discount on coffee. Aria felt something crystallize in her chest. It was rage, but it was buried so deep under layers of fear and desperation that it could not quite reach the surface. I just need my wages, Mr. Hale. I don't need anything else. His smile never wavered. That's too bad. Because I think you do need something else. And I think, eventually, you're going to ask me for it yourself. People always do. He left before she could respond, and Aria stood alone in the locker room, her hands trembling with a fury she could not afford to express. The shift lasted 14 hours. She cleaned rooms 16 through 38, stripping beds, scrubbing bathrooms, wiping down surfaces that had been touched by hands that belonged to people who had money. In room 22, she found a $50 bill on the nightstand. She pocketed it. In room 30, a businessman had left a shirt behind, expensive linen, and she considered stealing it before she talked herself out of it. When she finished, she walked past the front desk again, and she saw Douglas Hale at the counter, and he saw her, and he smiled like they shared a secret. She drove to Rebecca's apartment in Quincy, arriving at 11:06 p.m. Emma was asleep on Rebecca's couch, curled up beside her older cousin, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm like a lifeline. Rebecca met her at the door, her face apologetic and exhausted in equal measure. She asked about you at dinner, Rebecca whispered. I told her you were working. She didn't eat much. Aria gathered Emma into her arms and carried her to the car, her daughter's head resting on her shoulder, still holding that rabbit, still asleep and unaware that her mother was doing arithmetic, calculating exactly how many more nights they could survive this way. 1 week remained before the eviction. 30 days remained before child services took her daughter away. And 43 miles north, in a penthouse office overlooking Boston Harbor, Nicholas Calabrese sat at a mahogany desk and reviewed the weekly reports from his operations. Drugs. Money laundering. Bootleg spirits. Protection rackets. The machinery of an empire that had taken him 15 years to assemble, brick by brick, debt by debt, death by death. He was 41 years old, with dark hair silvered at the temples, a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, a knife wound from 2008, before he had consolidated power, when challenges still came from the outside. He wore a charcoal suit that cost $3,000, and beneath it a white shirt open at the collar, showing the edge of a gold cross he wore even though he had long ago stopped believing that God was listening. On his desk was a photograph of his younger brother Marco, dead now for 3 years, dead by Nicholas's own hand, the one death Nicholas could never repair or justify or explain, even to himself. And on that same evening, in the basement of the Whitmore Hotel, Douglas Hale stood in front of the tip jar and counted $230 that should have belonged to the housekeeping staff, and he smiled as he deposited it into his jacket pocket, and above him, Aria Morgan was on her knees in room 41, scrubbing soap scum from a bathtub, her fingers raw and bleeding from the harsh chemicals and the relentless work, and she whispered a prayer that she had almost forgotten she knew. None of them knew that in exactly 5 days, a nor'easter would blow into Boston with winds of 60 miles per hour, and that Aria Morgan would be trapped on a dark highway with a swollen eye and finger marks bruising her throat, and that a black convoy would find her collapsed against her dying car, and that Nicholas Calabrese would bring her into the neon glow of an empty diner at 3:22 in the morning, and that when she confessed that her daughter had not eaten in 3 days, something in him would shatter like glass, and he would make a choice that would set his entire operation in motion to dismantle everyone who had ever made her powerless. But that was still ahead of them, hidden in the future, invisible and waiting. For now, there was only the work. The eviction notice. The $34. The photo of James in a frame in her backpack. The stuffed rabbit that Emma would not sleep without. The understanding, growing heavier each hour, that Aria Morgan was running out of time, running out of money, and running out of ways to hold her family together. And on the wind that was gathering strength over the Atlantic Ocean, the nor'easter was forming, moving toward the coast, preparing to blow her entire world apart. The parking garage of the Whitmore Hotel smelled like exhaust and decay. October wind cut through the concrete structure in violent gusts, carrying the smell of dead leaves and coming rain. Aria Morgan pushed her housekeeping cart toward the employee section, her shoulders bent under the weight of 12-hour shifts that had become her entire existence. Her fingers were raw from bleach, her uniform stained with the debris of other people's lives. She had 47 minutes left on her shift. 47 minutes until she could drive to Quincy, pick up Emma from her sister Rebecca's apartment, and find a parking spot safe enough to sleep in. The November nor'easter was forming over the Atlantic. She didn't know that yet. She only knew her phone was at 8% battery and the check engine light in her 2004 Honda Civic had been glowing red for 6 months. Douglas Hale stepped out from between the parked cars like something emerging from shadow. He was 49 years old, thick through the middle, with the soft hands of a man who'd never done physical labor. His Whitmore Hotel manager's badge caught the fluorescent light. He smiled, but it was the smile of something predatory, something that had learned human expressions but never understood them. "Aria, we need to talk about your performance." She kept walking. "Mr. Hale, I'm finishing my shift. I still have rooms too. Now." He stepped closer, positioning himself between her and her car. His cologne was suffocating, synthetic and cloying. "I've noticed you've been resistant to my mentorship. That's not professional. That's not grateful." Aria's stomach clenched. She'd seen this movie play out in the break room with other women, had listened to their whispered warnings about being alone with him. She turned to walk back toward the hotel entrance. Douglas grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into her bicep through the thin uniform fabric. "I've been patient with you," he said, his voice dropping into something uglier. "A woman in your situation should be more appreciative. Your daughter needs things. I could help you. Real help. All you have to do is be smart about this." Aria wrenched her arm free. "Move away from me, Mr. Hale." His face transformed. The false smile vanished. What remained was pure entitlement, the rage of a man unaccustomed to hearing the word no. He stepped forward, backing her against her sedan. The metal was cold through her uniform. "You think you can reject me?" His voice had dropped to a hiss. "You're nobody. You sleep in a car that's older than your kid. You're nothing. You're invisible. But I see you, and right now you're going to." His hand came up open-palmed. The backhand landed across her face with enough force to snap her head sideways. Blood bloomed inside her mouth, copper and salt. Stars exploded in her vision. She fought. Her nails raked across his forearm, drawing red lines. She clawed at his face. Douglas grabbed her throat with both hands and slammed her back against the car hard enough to steal her breath. His fingers were thick and strong and completely merciless. Her vision tunneled. The edges of the world turned black. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't scream. Could only claw uselessly at his wrists while his thumbs pressed into her windpipe. The security guard's flashlight swept across the garage. A voice called out, distant and formal, "Everything okay over there?" Douglas released her instantly. He smoothed his tie, stepped back, pasted that horrible smile across his face. "Just fine," he called back, his voice bright and professional. Ms. Morgan was feeling faint. "I was helping her to her car." The guard nodded and moved on, satisfied. Aria collapsed against the vehicle, gasping, her hands flying to her throat. When her vision cleared, she caught her reflection in the car window, purple finger marks blooming like flowers across her neck, her left eye already swelling, blood from her split lip dripping onto her collar. Douglas leaned in one last time, his breath hot against her damaged face. "You breathe a word of this, you're done. I'll call child services myself and tell them you're unfit. That you're a danger to Emma. That you live in your car because you're mentally unstable. I'll have her taken by Friday." He walked away, disappearing into the stairwell that led upstairs to the hotel offices. Aria sat in her car for 10 minutes without moving. Just breathing. Just existing. Then she turned the key in the ignition and drove. Route 1A stretched north in the darkness, winding through industrial areas and marshland. The nor'easter was beginning to announce itself, wind gusting across the highway in violent bursts, dead leaves and debris swirling in her headlights. The temperature gauge on her dash read 32 degrees. The car was making a grinding sound again, a mechanical death rattle that she didn't have money to fix. 10 miles outside the city, in a stretch of road where the only lights were distant fast food signs, the car died. Not a sputtering death. A complete failure. The engine cut like a switch had been flipped. The car coasted to a stop on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly into the dark. Aria tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. Her hands were shaking. She tried again. Again. Nothing. She sat in the darkness with the wind rocking her car, the cold already seeping through the broken weather stripping around the windows. Her phone was at 7%. She had $34 in her wallet, the last of her tips that Douglas hadn't stolen because she'd hidden them in a sock under her seat. She had no money for a tow truck. No money for a motel. No way to call Rebecca and explain why she wasn't coming to pick up Emma. The temperature was dropping. The wind howled like something alive. Aria pulled out the photograph she kept in her glove box. James, her late husband, from 6 years ago. Before the cancer. Before the medical bills that had swallowed their entire savings. Before she'd become invisible, parking her car on Boston streets and pretending to her daughter that this was temporary, that they were camping, that soon, they would have a home again. She whispered to his photograph, "I can't do this anymore, James. I don't know how to keep going. I'm failing her. I'm failing Emma." The wind answered with a scream. Somewhere behind her, 2 miles back toward the city, 3 black Cadillac Escalades were moving north through the October darkness. The convoy moved with deliberate purpose, tinted windows hiding everything inside. In the lead vehicle, in the back seat, Nicholas Calabrese was staring at his phone without seeing it. He was 38 years old and had not slept properly in 3 years. His face was hard in the way faces became hard when they'd learned to hide everything. His dark hair was silvered at the temples. A scar ran from below his left eye to his jawline, a permanent reminder of a business deal that had gone wrong when he was 22. He wore a charcoal suit that cost $4,000. His watch was Patek Philippe, worth more than most cars. His hands bore the weight of decisions that had ended in bodies. Sergio was driving. Gino sat in the passenger seat, both of them alert and focused on the road. They'd been with Nicholas for 15 years, long enough to read the smallest shifts in his mood. Right now they could feel the darkness in him, thick and suffocating. They'd just come from a meeting in New Hampshire. A man named Pauli had been skimming from a shipment. $40,000. Nicholas had made the decision to end him. Not a debate. Not negotiation. Just the cold mathematics of crime, theft equals death. Nicholas hated the way that decision had felt. It had reminded him of Marco. Sergio spotted the sedan on the shoulder first. Hazard lights blinking weakly in the darkness. "Boss, someone's in there." Nicholas barely glanced up from his phone. Then Gino turned in his seat. "Doors open. Someone's outside." Nicholas looked. Through the wind and darkness, he saw a figure slumped on the gravel shoulder. Even from a distance, even in the dim light, he could see something was wrong. The figure was too small. Too still. "Stop," he ordered. The convoy came to a halt. Nicholas stepped out into the October wind, his cashmere coat whipping around him like wings, his breath visible in the frozen air. He approached slowly, hand near his weapon, not knowing what he'd find. Robbery victim. Overdose. Another casualty of a city that ate people alive. What he saw made him stop completely. A woman lay crumpled on the gravel, half conscious, shaking violently in a soaked housekeeping uniform. One eye was swollen completely shut. Her throat bore bruises in the perfect shape of fingers. Blood crusted her split lip and chin. She looked up at him with her one good eye and tried to scramble backward in terror. "Please," she gasped, her voice fractured and barely audible. "I don't have anything worth stealing." Nicholas kneeled slowly, hands visible and open, a gesture of surrender he'd never made to anyone. "I'm not going to hurt you. You need help. How long have you been out here?" "Hour. Maybe 2. She was sobbing, the kind of broken weeping that came from absolute despair. "My phone died. My car, the engine." She looked at him with something like accusation, as if his existence was somehow responsible for her suffering. "My daughter. I need to get to my daughter." Nicholas made a decision in that moment that defied every survival instinct he'd cultivated since Marco's betrayal. "Sergio, get blankets. Gino, water. Now." He extended his hand to the woman. "Can you stand?" She took his hand. She weighed almost nothing, he could feel her ribs through the uniform. He helped her to her feet and guided her to the back seat of the lead Escalade. She collapsed into the leather interior like she'd been released from consciousness itself. Nicholas gave the order, "Leo's Diner. 3 miles. Move." The convoy started moving through the darkness, toward a place where fluorescent light and the smell of stale coffee awaited, where a conversation in a checkered floor booth would change everything. Behind them, the broken sedan sat alone on the shoulder, hazards blinking into the night. The nor'easter was moving closer. The temperature was falling. But Aria Morgan was no longer alone in the darkness. And she had no idea she was sitting in the back seat of a man whose name would appear on federal wanted posters, whose decisions could end lives, whose operation spanned an entire city. Nicholas Calabrese sat across from her in that leather back seat and asked her one simple question: "What's your name?" And when she answered, something in him recognized something in her, a kind of powerlessness that he thought only he could feel. The storm was coming. Inside the vehicle, the real tempest was already beginning. The clock on the wall of Diana Whitfield's study read 9:11 a.m. when Douglas Hale noticed the absence. Aria Morgan's name, marked as no-show on the scheduling board, seemed to smile at him like a small victory. He leaned back in his chair, leather, expensive, purchased with stolen tips, and dialed Diana's private line. The phone rang twice. "Douglas. What is it?" Her voice arrived like a blade wrapped in ice. "That maid I told you about. The one living in her car. She didn't show up today. Finally broke, I'd say." He was grinning. He could hear it in his own voice. The pause on the other end stretched for exactly 3 seconds. "Good riddance," Diana said. "We can't have that kind of element associated with the Whitmore brand. Make some calls. Marriott, Ritz, Four Seasons. I want her blacklisted everywhere in this city. No hotel will touch her." Douglas's grin widened. "There's more. She has a daughter. 6 years old. And I could suggest to child services that she's unstable. Living in a car. Possibly using." He let that hang, savoring it. Diana's voice dropped lower, colder. "Do it. We protect our reputation at all costs." The call ended. What neither of them knew was that Sergio sat in a black sedan across the street from the Whitmore, a parabolic microphone angled toward their office window, every word of that conversation flowing directly into his earpiece and directly to Nicholas's phone. The recording would take exactly 9 minutes to reach 3 separate devices. The chain of evidence was about to become unbreakable. At 11 a.m., Aria Morgan stood in the middle of a 2-bedroom apartment in Jamaica Plain with hardwood floors that gleamed in the morning light. The windows were clean. The sun poured through them like liquid gold. Behind her, Emma was screaming with a kind of joy that Aria had never heard before, running from bedroom to bedroom, her small feet thundering against the wood. "Mommy! Mommy! We have a home. A real home." Rebecca, the nurse Nicholas had assigned to them, was unpacking groceries in the kitchen. $800 worth. Pasta, fresh vegetables, chicken, milk, cheese, bread that smelled like it had been baked this morning. Aria stood with an ice pack against her swollen eye and could not stop the tears. Not the desperate tears from 3 days ago. These were different. These were the tears of someone learning that falling might not always end in breaking. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Aria Morgan. The voice was a woman's, crystalline and sharp as broken glass. Yes? This is Diana Whitfield, owner of the Whitmore Hotel. I'm calling to inform you that you were terminated effective immediately for job abandonment. Furthermore, I've contacted every major hotel in Boston. You are blacklisted. You will never work in this industry again. Diana paused, and in that pause Aria heard something worse than anger. She heard satisfaction. I've also filed a report with Child Protective Services indicating that you are homeless, possibly using narcotics, and unfit to care for your daughter. Expect a visit from them shortly. The line went dead. Aria's hand dropped. The ice pack fell to the carpet. Emma's laughter echoed from the other room, and the sound of it made everything sharper, more terrible. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her face shifting from joy to concern in one heartbeat. Aria? What happened? Aria couldn't answer. She walked toward the balcony like a person moving through water. The door was open. October wind rushed in, bitter and cutting. For stories down, the street looked very far away and very close at the same time. She stepped outside. The cold bit through her thin uniform. Her throat throbbed where Douglas's hands had left their mark. Her eye was swollen shut. And now Diana Whitfield had taken away her last chance at employment and set child services on her like a predator. What if Nicholas couldn't stop them? What if they took Emma anyway? What if she had just traded one nightmare for another? What if she was dragging this man into her chaos and he walked away and she was left with nothing again? The railing was cold metal under her palms. She looked down at the street. The wind whipped her hair. Her knuckles turned white where she gripped the edge. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Emma just drew a picture of her new room. She wants to show you. Get back inside, it's freezing. There was a photo attached. Emma standing with a crayon drawing of a pink bedroom with stars on the ceiling, her face radiant, her small mouth open in a smile that didn't know about blacklists or child services or the weight of survival. Aria stepped away from the edge. She went inside and closed the balcony door with both hands shaking. Then she called Nicholas with the phone pressed so hard against her ear it hurt. They're coming for Emma. Diana Whitfield called child services. She said I'm unfit. Nicholas's voice came back steady, deadly calm. What's the exact name? Diana Whitfield. She owns the Whitmore. She's the one protecting Douglas. 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds that felt like falling. Stay in the apartment. Lock the doors. Do not answer unless it's me or Rebecca. Understood. Nicholas, what are you going to? Trust me. He hung up. At 2 p.m., Nicholas sat in his office in the North End with Sergio and Gino standing on either side of his desk. Between them lay a file compiled in the last 4 hours by people who knew how to find what others had hidden. Douglas Hale had been skimming tips and forcing unpaid overtime for 3 years. The total, $200,000 stolen. Diana Whitfield was complicit, using her connections and her charity galas to silence complaints, bribing health inspectors, and blacklisting staff who dared to speak. But there was more. She had been running an insurance fraud scheme, claiming false damages after minor incidents, collecting payouts. $1,200,000 over 5 years. Nicholas made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. The line rang once. Anthony Rossetti. Anthony. It's Nicholas Calabrese. I have a proposition. 5 hours later, at 5 p.m., Douglas Hale walked through the garage beneath the Whitmore, keys in his hand, already thinking about the drinks he would pour himself. He didn't notice the black panel van until it was beside him. He didn't notice the four men until hands grabbed him from behind, a cloth pressed to his face, and the world collapsed into darkness. He woke up in a basement in Southie at 7 p.m. His hands were zip-tied to a chair. Standing in front of him in a semicircle were 12 men in black suits, all wearing the Rossetti family crest. In the center stood Anthony Rossetti himself, a man whose reputation made Nicholas look like a saint. Douglas started screaming immediately. "There's been a mistake. I don't know what this is about." Anthony smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We know exactly who you are, Douglas. Nicholas Calabrese sold you to us. Something about you putting your hands on a woman under his protection. He was very specific about how we should handle you." Douglas's face went white. The color drained out like water from a broken cup. "Nicholas Calabrese?" His voice cracked. No, please, I didn't know," she never said. "Too late," Anthony said. "Nicholas doesn't like getting his hands dirty anymore. So he made a deal. He gives us you, we deliver justice, and he keeps his conscience clean. See how that works?" Douglas collapsed in the chair, trembling like a cornered animal. "Please, I have money. I can pay you. Whatever he's paying, I'll double it. You don't have enough money to buy your way out of what's coming." Meanwhile, at that same moment, Diana Whitfield stood in her Beacon Hill mansion hosting a charity gala for at-risk youth. The irony was invisible to her. She stood on a marble staircase in a designer gown and spoke about empowering the vulnerable while her assistant whispered urgent words in her ear. Diana excused herself and went to her study. She picked up the phone. "This is Diana Whitfield." "Ms. Whitfield, this is Special Agent Carson with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, insurance fraud, labor trafficking, and racketeering. Federal agents are entering your home now. Do not resist." Diana dropped the phone. Downstairs, she heard the crash of her front door being broken down, the heavy percussion of boots on marble floors. She ran to her window and saw 8 black SUVs with FBI markings surrounding her house like wolves around prey. Agents in tactical gear flooded through her home. She tried to run. She tried to reach the safe where she kept passports and cash. But agents burst into her study and forced her to the ground. They dragged her out of her $5,000 gown, screaming, pleading, begging them to understand who she was. They didn't care who she was. What Diana didn't know was that the FBI had been building a case against her for months. That anonymous tip, the one delivered through channels so clean no one could trace it, came from Nicholas Calabrese's attorney. The detailed financial records, the recorded phone calls, the evidence of everything. All of it was his gift to the federal government, wrapped in careful anonymity. In the basement in Southie, Anthony Rossetti said, "Here's what happens next. You confess. Everything. Every woman you touched. Every dollar you stole. Every threat you made. On camera. And then we deliver you and that confession to the police." Douglas sobs, broken completely. "And then? What happens then?" "Then you go to prison. 40 years minimum. We have friends inside who'll make sure you understand what powerlessness feels like. Every single day for the rest of your life, you'll remember that woman you choked in the parking garage. And you'll know this is justice." Douglas confessed everything on that camera, his voice shattered, tears streaming. He named every woman. He confessed to every crime. He begged for mercy he would never receive. At 9 p.m., both Douglas Hale and Diana Whitfield were in police custody. Douglas facing assault, sexual harassment, wage theft, extortion. Diana facing federal charges that would put her away for decades. The raid was all over the news. Her mansion seized. Her empire collapsing. Every staff member she had exploited was coming forward. Nicholas watched the news from his office and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No regret. Just cold calculation. Sergio said quietly, "It's done, Boss. Both of them are finished. Nicholas nodded. Make sure Aria sees this. She needs to know she's safe. But what Nicholas didn't say was that destroying them didn't make him feel powerful. It made him feel empty. Because revenge is easy. Building something real, like what he was trying to do with Aria, that was the hard part. 6 months had passed since the arrest. The penthouse in the Seaport district overlooked Boston Harbor, where sailboats cut through April water and the spring sun turned everything gold. But inside, Nicholas Calabrese stood in his study staring at a photograph he'd never intended to see. It was Aria, laughing. Really laughing, her head tilted back, her bruised throat now unmarked and smooth. Emma sat on her shoulders, both of them wearing matching sunflower yellow rain jackets, standing in front of Luciano's restaurant in the North End. The photo had been taken by Rebecca, Aria's sister, and somehow it had found its way to his desk through Sergio's careful hands. She's thriving, Sergio had said quietly, placing it there. You should see her at the restaurant. She manages the whole front of house now. 12 staff members. They all respect her. Nicholas had said nothing. He'd picked up the photo and placed it face down on the mahogany surface. That had been 4 months ago. Now, standing in his empty penthouse at dusk, Nicholas poured scotch into a glass and tried not to think about her eyes that night when she'd looked at him in the diner. Like he was something other than what he was. Like he wasn't the man who'd ordered 17 deaths. Like his hands weren't stained with blood that no amount of expensive soap could wash clean. The city lights began to flicker on across Boston as darkness fell. October wind rattled the windows. 1 year to the day since he'd found her bleeding on the highway. 1 year to the day since everything had shifted on its axis. His phone buzzed. Marco. Boss, Luciano's is getting the health inspection tomorrow. Aria's been prepping all week. Perfect scores so far. Good, Nicholas said, and hung up before Marco could say anything else. He couldn't see her. That was the agreement he'd made with himself. He'd given her everything, the apartment lease paid for a full year, the job at Luciano's arranged through his ownership, Emma's enrollment at the elementary school on Beacon Hill. He'd given her safety and stability and a future that didn't include him in it. She was better off. But the photo on his desk, face down, seemed to mock that logic. The knock came at 8:13 p.m. Nicholas didn't move from the window. Outside, the harbor lay dark and infinite. The knocking came again, more insistent. He'd instructed security to let no one upstairs. Which meant either Sergio had disobeyed, or she'd found another way up. He turned from the window and opened the door. Aria stood in his doorway wearing a dress the color of deep blue water, her hair falling down her back in waves, her eyes steady and unafraid. Behind her stood the empty hallway, the precise moment between one life and another. You shouldn't be here, he said. Can I come in? He moved aside. She walked past him and the scent of her, something like lavender and coffee, the smell of living, filled the apartment. She moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched like a bridge between them. Why did you stay away? Her voice was soft but it carried through the empty space like a bell. You don't need me anymore, Nicholas said. You're safe. Emma is thriving. That was the point. She turned to face him. That was the point? Nicholas, you saved my life. You gave me everything. And then you disappeared like I was a project you finished. Aria, he stopped, his hand rising to his hair, to the gesture that bought him time when words failed. You don't understand what I am. What I've done. The people I've hurt. You think I'm some kind of hero, but I'm not. I'm the man who strangled his own brother. I know. The words hung in the air between them. I've ordered deaths, he continued, and there was something like relief in his voice, as if he was finally saying the thing he'd been saving for her. I've destroyed lives. Everything I touch turns to ash. You were dying and I pulled you out, but if I stay, I'll drag you back down. Aria stepped closer. You're wrong. I'm not. You're wrong, she repeated. The distance between them narrowed with each step. You think you're poison? Nicholas, you're the reason Emma still has a mother. You're the reason I wake up without fear. You're the reason I learn to trust again. You didn't destroy me. You rebuilt me. Her voice didn't break. It held steady, like someone who had already made peace with what she was about to say. And yes, I know what you are. I'm not naive. But I also know that the most powerful man in Boston knelt on a diner floor at 3 in the morning because a nobody woman's daughter was hungry. Nicholas's jaw tightened. Outside, a car alarm wailed briefly in the street below, then died away. I know you could have driven past my car that night, Aria continued. You could have left me to freeze. Instead, you stopped. You knelt. You chose mercy when the world taught you cruelty. And that choice changed both of us forever. Why are you here? His voice was lower now, almost broken. Because a year ago you asked me to trust you. Now I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I see you. All of you. And I'm not afraid. For the first time, she saw it, the crack in the armor. The rigid line of his shoulders softened. His breathing changed. His face showed something raw and dangerous and desperately human. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to let someone in without destroying them. Aria reached up and placed her hands on either side of his face. Her palms were warm. Her touch was gentle in a way that made everything harder. Then we'll figure it out together. Because you saved me, Nicholas. Now let me save you. Nicholas Calabrese, the man who hadn't cried since he was 12 years old, broke completely. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only solid thing remaining in a world that had spent years trying to convince him nothing was real anymore. His shoulders shook once, twice. His breathing went ragged. She held him. She simply held him. No words. No apologies. Just her arms around him and the truth that sometimes saving someone means letting them finally fall apart. Outside, October wind carried the scent of salt water and distant rain. 18 months later, the same penthouse balcony overlooked Boston Harbor at sunset. The sky burned orange and pink. Emma sat inside at the dining table, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked through a math worksheet. Nicholas stood at the kitchen counter, watching her with the patience of a man learning how to be patient, answering her questions about fractions with gentle precision. Aria leaned against the railing beside him, her hand in his. She wore a simple dress and she looked peaceful in a way that the woman from the diner never could have imagined. Healthy. Strong. Home. Do you remember what you said to me that night in the diner? She asked. When you asked why I was fighting so hard for Emma. You said because she's your daughter, Nicholas replied. Because love makes us stronger than we think we are. You were wrong about one thing, though. Aria turned to him. You said you helped me because I gave you a reason to use your power for good. But Nicholas, you didn't save me because you needed a reason. You saved me because despite everything you'd been through, despite Marco's betrayal, despite all those years building walls around your heart, you were still capable of compassion. That was always in you. I didn't give that to you. I just reminded you it was there. He looked out at the water, where light broke into 1,000 pieces. For 3 years I thought trust was weakness. I thought letting people close meant giving them the power to destroy me. And then I found you bleeding on the highway and I realized the real weakness was being so afraid of betrayal that I stopped living. You didn't just let me save you, Aria. You saved me from becoming so powerful I was completely alone. Emma called out from inside, her voice bright and certain, Mom. Nicholas. I figured out the fraction problem. They both turned toward her at the same moment. Their eyes met. Their hands stayed intertwined. Inside the apartment, the three of them moved through the warm light like a family that had always existed, even when the world insisted they never could. The camera pulled back, showing them through the window, a woman, a man, a child, built not on blood or obligation but on choice and compassion. If this story moved your heart, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that compassion is stronger than cruelty, that one choice can change everything, and that we all have the power to save each other. Subscribe because tomorrow we're bringing you another story about the moment everything changes. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been saved by a stranger's kindness? Or have you been the one to save someone else? Your story matters. We'll see you in the next one.